Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is my review of episode 6 of season 3 of Star Trek Picard called Bounty. And I was about to make a very angry rant about this episode after I first watched it yesterday, but I decided to wait and to watch it again first. And on second viewing, I enjoyed it more. There were a lot of things in the episode that annoyed me. In the first viewing, I was constantly face-palming, I was kind of laughing at how ridiculous some of it was. On my second viewing of it, I wasn't as irritated as the first time and I kind of enjoyed it more, even though I still think a lot of things in this episode don't make a lot of sense. And there are two big issues which still annoy me a lot. The biggest one is the Moriarty clickbait that they did. When they first showed us the trailer many months ago, they showed us Moriarty, who was a very interesting character in some of the best episodes of TNG. And so when they teased us with Moriarty in the trailer, we, the fans, immediately started theorizing what they might do with him, how fascinating it might be, expecting some kind of continuation of the old story from TNG. And then when I watched the actual episode, I heard that the actor said that he only filmed in one day, so I knew it's going to be a short appearance, but I thought it will have some kind of meaning to it, and in the end, it turns out that what we saw in the trailer is basically it. So it's a short, brief cameo appearance, and it's not even the real Moriarty. In the end, it's just a projection from Data's memory or something, and so it's not even the real him. So that was such a huge disappointment because of the missed opportunity of, after we spent months theorizing of the kind of story they might do with him. In the end, it's nothing. In the end, it's just one short scene without any real purpose except for another member berry. And by the way, this episode is so crammed full of member berries, it is going to take me half the review just to list all of them. It kind of reminds me of that Lower Deck episode when they literally went into some kind of a museum ship in which there were like hundreds of references to many different episodes of all the shows. So they do kind of the same thing here in two different locations. There's the Daystrom Institute, and there's the ship museum with a whole bunch of ships from all the shows and movies. And so it was fun in that sense, but it kind of felt silly because of how much fan service there was. But anyway, back to Moriarty. If I hadn't seen him in the trailer, maybe I wouldn't be so annoyed, because if I would have been pleasantly surprised to see him in the middle of the episode and then immediately realize, oh, it's just a projection, it's a memory, I wouldn't have had those months of expectations and theorizing and waiting to see what interesting story they'll do with that, so I wouldn't be so disappointed. So after I watched the episode a second time with a different attitude, not expecting anything bigger, then it kind of felt better, it felt smoother, and if I hadn't seen the trailer, maybe I would have even enjoyed that scene. I blame the trailer more than the actual show, but still I feel it's a disappointment. It's a clickbait, it's member berries, and it's just recycling old stuff from the previous shows again. And so where is the new ideas, where are the new stories? And again, there are a bunch of scenes, just recycling scenes from older movies, even if it doesn't make sense in the new context. For example, when we see Vadik on her ship and she's berating the other changelings because they're unable to find the Titan, and I immediately think, wait, if all of them are changelings, why are they even talking? Why are some of them talking with clicks? Some of them are talking in English. Why are they even talking at all? Why are they not linking with each other to talk that way? Aren't they all changelings, as they said? After one of her henchmen begins complaining about her leadership, she basically vaporizes him right away. And that really took me out of it and annoyed me, because what is the one big rule of the changelings? That no changeling should ever harm another, and yet they casually just vaporize each other now. So that really annoyed me. That's now, I think, the most annoying part in the whole episode, and they were just trying to replicate that scene from Star Trek 3 when the Klingon Doc Brown vaporized one of his officers because he said something to him, and so they wanted to do the same kind of scene, but the context doesn't make sense. If they are changelings, why are they behaving that way? And also she says they must help their brothers and sisters who are hiding on the Federation ships, and I'm thinking, wait, since when do changelings have genders? Why are they brothers and sisters? And also she says they are suffering wearing the faces of their enemy, but she's also pretending to be a human, isn't she? So why is she doing that to herself? And why are the other ones wearing those silly bird masks all the time? Why are they not just moving around in their goo form, which is more comfortable for them anyway? Why are they not being like Yaphet in the Orville? If they hate solids so much, why are they pretending to be solids when no one else is looking? and talking with each other instead of linking with each other and killing each other, even though no changeling should harm another. So that I think is the stupidest part in the whole episode. So meanwhile on the Titan, they're planning to break into Daystrom Station to find out what the changeling stole from there. And they have that little computer key that Vulcan Genster gave them, which they have no idea if it will even work or not. They just trusted him for some reason. So they're going to risk everything by beaming into that station to plug that key into the wall socket. And that will immediately deactivate all the safeties inside that base, which is unmanned for some reason. It doesn't have any ships around it, even though that place contains so many cool and powerful things, and yet no one is guarding it apparently, except some computer AI, which they kept mentioning. So anyway, when they arrive at that base, it shows that they are hiding behind a small moon next to it, which makes sense because, oh, that's clever, so that they cannot be scanned. And somehow I guess they can beam through that moon into the station. Fine, I guess. Maybe there was some advancement in transporter technology. Maybe I could buy that. But then in a later scene, when they escape that station after some other Starfleet ships arrive, suddenly they're right next to that station and not on the other side of the moon. So that seems like a big editing mistake in my opinion. That was very jarring. And it was like seconds away from each other. So you cannot say, oh, they just came closer. No, they were on the other side of that moon when they were beaming over. And then after that, they were suddenly right next to the station and then escaped. So Raffi, Riker and Worf beam over to that station, which then scans them and cannot identify them for some reason. And then they plug that key into it. And then it opens all the doors and they can walk around the facility without any interruptions. And then we see a whole bunch of member berries on screens. We see what looks like Shinzon's biogenic weapon from Nemesis. We see a modified tribble with teeth which tries to attack Worf in a scene similar to that scene in Aliens when Burke was looking at the facehugger which jumped at him. And constantly Riker is poking fun at Worf's expense, and all of that stuff is fine. There are a lot of character moments which I did kind of like. I enjoyed the reunion of the characters and all of that, so there was a lot of stuff that I liked, but the story itself is still kind of weak. The dialogue, the writing is still kind of ridiculous, and once again, everyone knows about Section 31. They beam into the facility and say that, oh, this is where Section 31 has been keeping all the neatest toys or something like that. And then Riker asks, Section 31? And for a brief moment I was happy, oh, finally someone who never heard about Section 31, who are supposed to be a top secret shadowy organization. And then Worf explains to him that it's a subdivision of Starfleet intelligence. And then Riker says, oh, of course I know who they are. I was just surprised this is where they keep all their toys or something. And I was facepalming so hard. So now they're making it official that the Star Trek Discovery version of Section 31 is the same one here as well. So everyone knows about Section 31 and it's an official part of Starfleet now. So that is really annoying. You know, previously when we were complaining about it in Discoveries, people were defending that, saying, oh, that's because it's a prequel. It's because it's centuries before the other shows. And back then it was like that, but later it became more secretive, more separate and all of that. But no, now it's the same thing like in Discovery, so it's the same problem, and everyone knows about it. So this was so ridiculous, you know, even that Ferengi Sneed knew all about it. And apparently they've been keeping all this top secret stuff in the same place without any guards, without any protection, with only an AI guarding it. And the AI, as we'll see, turns out to be crazy, with split personality, with parts of lore in it and all of that. I'll get to that shortly. So anyway, all of this is ridiculous. So as I was watching the episode, the first time I was kind of cringing, I was facepalming, I was saying this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid, even though it was kind of fun at the same time. So the Tribble jumps at Worf, then later Riker sees the Genesis 2 device, and we see what appears to be the remains of Captain James T. Kirk in stasis. So I guess someone dug him up from his grave on Veridian 3 and keeps him in stasis to revive him in some point in the future. And later we'll find out they did it with another captain, I'll get to that. So anyway, then we see that the AI system is actually looking at them and tracking them, and then we hear strange music in the corridors, which Riker kind of seems familiar with, and we see a crow flying through the corridors, and it turns out to be a hologram, and that immediately did remind me of that dream sequence from TNG, when Data was dreaming about birds and all of that. And then Moriarty suddenly shows up, so I guess we were meant to think, oh, Moriarty is that AI that is safeguarding this place for some reason, and they're going to explain all of that. But then Riker almost immediately says, oh, that's not the same self-aware Moriarty that we knew from the show. And so what's the point to even do that? If it's not him, then why do that? So in short, it turns out that Data is the AI guarding the place, and that it's just from his memory, and so it's not the real Moriarty, even though he shoots real bullets at them, but he misses. And then the music that Riker hears in the corridor suddenly reminds Riker of the first time he met Data in the first episode of TNG, and Data was trying to whistle, and he finished the song for him because Data couldn't whistle. And they literally show us flashback of that scene, and this time Riker remembers it perfectly and whistles the song till the end. And then Moriarty says, "Marvelous," just as Data did in that scene. Now, it could have been a nice callback, but what annoyed me in it is that there was a scene in the end of Star Trek Nemesis, after Data died, the first time he died, and Riker said that the first time he met Data, he was whistling something, but he doesn't remember what it was. And yet suddenly, 30 years after that, suddenly he does remember that. So I guess Riker's memory improves with age. I guess I can explain all of this by saying maybe right after that scene in Nemesis when he was struggling to remember what that song was, maybe he kept thinking about it until he did remember, or maybe he looked it up and then remembered what Data was trying to whistle, and after that he remembered it forever. So I guess I can come up with excuses, but still, as I was watching the episode the first time, it annoyed me, it took me out of it, because I realized, oh, they don't remember that scene in Nemesis when he was trying to remember the exact same thing and couldn't. So anyway, they must have tripped some alarm because a bunch of Starfleet ships arrive next to that base, and then they have to leave the away team on the station and warp out of there to come back later, and they go to the Fleet Museum run by Geordi, which is right next door apparently, because it seems to take them only a few minutes to go back and forth, and they are even able to communicate with their comm badges with the away mission while on the other station. So it seems to be really close by. Maybe it's the Titan's engines are so quick, you know, I mentioned it before, how quickly they got to the edge of the Federation in the first 2 episodes, and that no other ship was in range, and so the Titan must be a super fast ship, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. Another possible explanation is that maybe Geordi's station is actually in the same system very close by, because actually it would make sense because, you know, in All Good Things he said that his wife Leah became director of the Daystrom Institute, and his kids had the same exact names, by the way, as in this show, even though in that one he also had a male son, which is never mentioned in this show. He only has 2 daughters apparently, so maybe he set up the Fleet Museum next to where his wife works. And that's how it takes only a few minutes to go back and forth. And so that station itself is apparently not manned at all, but maybe there are other outposts of Daystrom in the same sector. And so I guess I can come up with excuses again, but as I was watching the show the first time, I was again feeling that the writers just don't care. You can just go anywhere you want in the galaxy in as little time as needed for the plot to happen, without any consideration for things like distance and all of that. So it was kind of annoying the first time I watched it, and the editing mistakes, like showing the ship hiding on the other side of the moon, and in the next shot it's suddenly on the opposite side next to the station. So make up your mind, where exactly are they in space. Another thing that annoyed me in this episode is that they basically turned Geordi LaForge into a coward who only thinks about his own family and doesn't care about saving the galaxy, even though the galaxy contains his family. So it doesn't even make sense. Like, if they tell him, and they do have proof of it, they do have the body of the changeling, they do have proof and evidence that indeed there are changelings, and so it's not like in the episode All Good Things when Geordi was hesitant about helping Picard because he wasn't sure if Picard was telling him the truth or not, because he suspected he might just be crazy, and yet still he was helping him out on the final mission and all of that. And so if they did something like that, if that he is not sure if he's even reliable, if he's telling the truth or not, then it could make sense. But he has definite proof that changelings are taking over all of Starfleet. His own daughter tells him that she saw a copy of her own dead body, which was a changeling. So he knows for sure no one is lying to him, they are telling him the truth, and that Starfleet is compromised, and so why doesn't he want to help him? So he is worried for the safety of his daughters, that makes sense. He's angry that Picard put his daughter in danger, that makes sense. But still there is a bigger threat which is also endangering his daughters. If he does nothing and the changelings win and do something against all of Starfleet, all of the Federation, his own daughters will die because of that. So his inaction will be the fault. So it makes no sense. Like, if they set it up differently, that maybe he doesn't believe Picard fully, or if he thinks the threat is not that big, then I could forgive it, then I could understand it, but it makes no sense the way it's shown. Why didn't they tell him that Ro Laren was involved and that she died? Wasn't he close to her, like in the final seasons of TNG? Geordi and Rolaren became kind of close friends after they had like several episodes of adventures together, and so they seem to be close, and yet no one even bothers to tell him about Rolaren's investigation and that she sacrificed herself. Like, he doesn't seem to even know about it, and he's only worried about the safety of his daughters and nothing else, and so he refuses to help them. So that really annoyed me that they turned Geordi into a coward. Of course, later on he does come around after his own daughter convinces him. And as for his fleet museum, it's obviously a whole bunch of fan service. We see a whole bunch of classic ships in that museum, which he's restoring. And there was also a hint about another ship he's working on, which is not yet seen, which is in a closed hangar, which I'm guessing we'll see in the end of the season. And my guess is that it's going to be a restored Enterprise D, which they kind of hinted at earlier in the season. There was that painting that Picard wanted to give to Geordi because he knew that Geordi would love it. And there was that mention of no one wants the fat ones with the models of the ships. And so we never yet saw the Enterprise D, which was, you know, the main ship of the TNG show, and one of my personal favorite ships. By the way, I grew up watching TNG, so I personally have the strongest feeling toward that ship. So I'm betting in the end of the season, Geordi will unveil his restored Enterprise D, and that's going to be beautiful, I hope. And they better not disappoint me with this, and it wouldn't make sense to be any other ship. He's obviously restoring older ships. So we do see a bunch of classic ships, and even some Klingon ships, and even a Romulan ship. And then Jack has the brilliant idea of stealing the cloaking device of the ship from Star Trek IV, which sank in the ocean, and they said that they had trouble finding it because the cloaking device accidentally activated, even though wasn't that ship drained of all power. That's why it crashed after they made another time jump. You know, after the first time jump they said that it drained all their power, they barely had any power left, and the cloaking device did work after that as well, but they said they only have like 3 days until it runs out of power completely, something like that. And so if they did another time jump, didn't it drain all the power again? So even if the cloaking device suddenly activated, it probably wouldn't keep working forever. It will probably only last a few days at most. And so what's the big deal about finding the ship after that, after it runs out of power? And so that was a neat line, but also doesn't really make sense if you think about it. And so Jack steals the cloaking device to install it on the Titan so that they can go back to Daystrom undetected. And I keep thinking this is a 100-year-old technology. Since then there were a lot of advancement in finding cloaked ships and all of that, so would it really work? So I guess I can forgive it for the sake of the fun of it, because it was a fun element. And there was also the neat line of Geordi saying to Picard, you know how many treaty this violates and all of that, and then Picard says, add it to my tab. I did like that, even though, you know, if the Romulan Empire no longer exists, why do they still need to abide with treaties with the Romulans, especially when they know now that the Romulans were the ones who attacked Mars, who destroyed all their shipyards on Mars, and so that was an act of war, so why should they abide by any previous treaty with the Romulans after that event? So it doesn't really make much sense. I guess it's a treaty with the Klingons. Maybe Martok is no longer the Chancellor. If they wanted to appease the Klingons, why not just give them the cloaking device? Even though, again, it's an ancient one, so who even cares? And so I guess Martok gave a special dispensation to Geordi, maybe because of a request by Worf, to allow them to keep the ship intact with its cloaking device. And so maybe it was a gesture of goodwill by Martok, and maybe after that he got replaced by a more aggressive Chancellor who declares that if the Federation uses cloaking technology, then he will go to war with them, because the Romulans cannot do that now. The Romulans are obviously much weakened. So anyway, they steal the cloaking device and then jump back to the Daystrom station, and they only cloak the ship after they get there. And yet they are not detected, so that was a little bit silly as well. And also when they engage the cloaking device, we see it from inside the bridge, and we see the wobbling effect, and we see the outside of space from the bridge. And so we never saw it like that, but I guess maybe it was a glitch that happens sometimes that we just didn't happen to see it ever before. So it's not a big deal. So Geordi does end up helping them, even though in the beginning he was being a coward and being illogical, because if he knows that all of humanity is in danger, that obviously includes his daughters. So if he does want to protect them, then helping Picard makes sense, and yet for some reason he was behaving as if getting involved will endanger his family, and he just wants to stay out of it. So I dislike that part, but I did like the scene when his daughter came to talk with him and convinced him to help them out. And then after the cloaking device is stolen, he does come and help them install it. And when he came into the room, and after they said they don't know how to fix it, and then he comes in and says, I do, and immediately goes to work, and he forges all over the place to fix the thing. And so they jump back to the Daystrom station and cloak, and no one notices them, even though they were decloaked when they approached. So I guess warp signatures and stuff like that are no longer detectable, and you cannot be at warp while cloaked, unlike before. And also 7 says they will have to decloak to beam them out, which is also contradictory to what we saw previously. Even in the voyage home with the same exact ship, they could still beam in and out of the ship while the ship was cloaked. And also in a few episodes of Deep Space Nine, we saw that they are able to beam to places while the ship is cloaked. So it was never a problem. And yet now suddenly they say we cannot beam through the cloak. We have to decloak and only then we can beam. But maybe it's because the cloaking device wasn't properly modified to fit the ship yet or something like that. They can invent excuses again to explain it, but the show itself obviously didn't even think about it, and so that's still annoying to me. And meanwhile, Worf, Raffi, and Riker finally get to the center of the station, and we see Data in the middle of the room, and there are some pieces of Before next to him, even though the last time we saw Before it was in the Daystrom Institute on Earth. So how exactly did it end up in the hands of Dr. Sung, the latest one? And how did he get the pieces of lore? Because he says that he combined all of them into one android now. He says he took pieces of Data, took pieces of Before, pieces of Lal, pieces of lore, and pieces of himself, and combined all of them into a new synthetic android, which looks old because it's biological like Picard. So how was he able to even do that? So that's another thing that kind of made me scratch my head, because it makes no sense. If they said that it's Section 31 that did this project of combining all the androids together or something like that, could make sense since they had all the pieces. I guess they confiscated his work from the android planet after he died, and it was never stated how he died, but it was implied that he had some kind of terminal illness in the season 1, and that's why he was working on building himself a synthetic body, which he ended up giving as a gift to Picard for some reason. And especially funny looking back now at that scene when they were ending Data's life inside that simulation in the end of season 1, Dr. Sung was standing there together with Picard as they were unplugging Data forever, laying Data to rest, all of that stuff, and he was standing there with a straight face while knowing that in the next room he's working on another Data. He still has backups of Data on another computer disk, and he's going to revive him again later. So how silly does that scene look now, when he's kind of mourning the death of Data, when he's working on another Data in the next room? So that makes it ridiculous. It's kind of too silly, it's too convoluted, it's not properly explained. How did he get the pieces of Before? I guess Jurati sent it to him, since she remained friends with him. She was in control of the Daystrom station on Earth, so maybe she sent him the Before parts. But what about the lore parts? So did she also have them? I guess she sent it to him. Then he died, then Section 31 arrived and stole all of his work. So he was working on a new android synthetic body, which at first he thought, I guess, to put himself into. Then he decided to simply combine himself with all the other androids. I guess Before still contained all the memories of Data and Lal, so that explains that. Then Jurati sent to him the pieces of Before and lore, then he combined them also. Why the hell would he want to install lore's mind into all of this? I have no idea, knowing that he was a psychopath and all of that. And so he was working on combining all of them together, and then he died, and then Section 31 stole all of his work. Maybe they also took that technology that Soji was using to open a portal for those giant robot tentacles from another galaxy to come in. Maybe they took all of that stuff as well, and maybe that was the basis for the portal weapon that they developed from it. So they never mentioned that, but that would actually kind of make sense. And so they took Sung's research, which is unfinished, and put it in charge of protecting this most important station in the whole galaxy, containing all this super top secret technology. Even though this android obviously has a split personality, so he's part lore, part Lal, part Before, part Data, part Sung, all of it mixed together. He doesn't know who he is. And acting wise, that's a neat idea. It kind of reminds me of the idea from the episode Masks, in which Data was having like a split personality. The problem with that episode was that Brent Spiner said that he didn't have enough time to prepare for it, and so it came out ridiculous. But the idea itself could have worked with some better acting, and whenever Data was playing the different Sung androids and all of that, he was great as that, and so it actually kind of works here. So he has like a split personality, so they beam him out as well, but Riker gets captured by the bad guys and is later tortured by them, and some of them are obviously Starfleet officers, and yet they seem totally okay with beating someone to death and threatening to shoot him, They stand around in the background, and it all seems normal to them, just another day on the job, and so that again makes Starfleet look evil, and again, those are not changelings because Vadik later vaporizes them. So these officers who stay and watch as Riker is beaten and tortured and threatened to be killed, they seem totally fine with it, just another day on the job. And then the main one beating Riker suddenly morphs, and it's Vadik. And then she vaporizes those other officers who I guess were human and didn't mind Riker being tortured. Or maybe those were her own men, since previously she was vaporizing her own people as well without problems. In that scene I mentioned, which annoyed me. By the way, in that scene she was also kind of shouting at them, and it kind of sounded almost like that scene in Pulp Fiction when she said, "I will execute every motherfucking one of you," and all of that, and then she does execute one of them. I will be making a lot of edits with all of this stuff in the near future. So there is definitely a lot of fun things about it, but still, why couldn't they make it make sense? Why couldn't it all be logical? I mean, who exactly is she imitating? Why does she have facial scars? Why does she have that stupid haircut? Why is she behaving in a goofy manner? She's all like, "Where is Picard?" That's the way she sounds like, and so it's kind of too goofy, too ridiculous. No changeling has ever behaved like that, and she keeps making those speeches to her crew to convince them, "Oh, we will burn the Federation to ashes." So anyway, she kidnaps Riker, and Riker doesn't seem scared at all. He kind of pokes fun at them. They kind of beat him all the time, but he just laughs it off and says, "Do you really think I'm going to betray my friends for you?" And then she says, "Not for me." And then she shows him that she also has Deanna Troi captive. There was a previous scene when she said, "You have to find me any friend that Picard ever had," something like that. And so they tracked down Riker's wife and kidnapped her, which comes in so conveniently. How did they know that Riker is going to be taken captive by them specifically? And they were able to capture specifically his wife. And where is his daughter? Where is Kestra? Why didn't they capture her as well? And I guess he will know that she's the real one. She's not just a changeling pretending to be Troy, because they have that telepathic connection and all of that. So he will probably hear her thoughts and all of that, and that's how he will know it's really her. So it's awfully convenient that from all the friends of Picard's friends, they kidnap specifically the woman who is able to prove she's not a changeling with her telepathy. So how convenient is that? And meanwhile, on the Titan, they keep interrogating Data, who kind of switches personalities all the time. One moment he's Lore, one moment he's B4, one moment he's Sung, and sometimes he's Data. They say that he looks old because he's now kind of organic. He's synthetic, he's like Picard. They say he's a hybrid. He still has some android parts, but also synthetic parts like a human, and so that's why he looks old. So that's the perfect excuse. I was suggesting that myself way back in season 1 when I said, why are they killing Data off when they can simply, they have the perfect setup already when they establish there are these organic androids who are synthetic. They are like replicants, basically. They are almost flesh and blood who look totally human, so why not just put Data's mind into such a body, and then you have the perfect excuse for why he looks old, because he's actually organic and not a robot anymore. So that's what they do here now. So I guess I'm okay with that. That was my own suggestion, only that we had to go through this convoluted process to get here. And so anyway, they keep questioning Data, what exactly did the changeling steal from Daystrom? And Data looks at Picard and says, "Jean-Luc Picard." And then he says, "Yes, Data, it's me, it's me." And Worf kind of rolls his eyes and says he's malfunctioning. Where is the reset button? And so Picard keeps asking Data, what did they steal from Daystrom? And he keeps saying, "Jean-Luc Picard, Jean-Luc Picard, Jean-Luc Picard." And on second viewing, this scene is kind of hilarious to me. At first, I also thought it's just glitching and malfunctioning, and so it was kind of ridiculous and silly. But now when I rewatch the scene again, it is kind of hilarious that he's actually answering the question, and they just don't get it until he projects it from his eyes. Suddenly his eyes turn into holographic projectors, which is something we never saw him do before, so it was also kind of ridiculous in the first viewing. I almost laughed at that. And then he projects an image of a person on the screen, and in the first viewing I thought that's Odo. It looked kind of like Odo at first, and I thought we were going to get some kind of CGI version of Odo or some other changeling. Maybe it's the female founder who was kept locked away there and they wanted to rescue her. But no, it turns out it's actually human remains, and that's the dead body of Jean-Luc Picard. And that's why they kept saying, "Jean-Luc Picard, Jean-Luc Picard," because that's literally what they stole. So after Picard died in season 1 and his mind was transferred into a synthetic body, did he forget about his previous body? He just left it there in that pod? Like he never asked for any funeral arrangements or to do something with the body? He just left it there to rot? and they put it in stasis, and then Section 31 took it for some reason, just as they took Kirk's body as we saw previously. So what for? So all of this is kind of so silly, but I think I know where they're going with it. So they show us the dead body of Picard, and that's the big thing that the changeling stole, which previously they said it's 10 times more dangerous than the portal weapon. And so I think I know where they're going with it, which is also kind of silly but also cool at the same time. And now I get why they had that scene previously when Shaw was attacking Picard and saying the Borg had a name for you because you are the most deadly Borg ever. They even gave you a name, Locutus. And that's what I think the show is going to do. They're going to revive the dead body of the old Picard to turn him into Locutus, to summon the Borg into attacking the Federation again. And they seem to be arranging for the entire Starfleet to be in one place for that holiday, which previously they mentioned Geordi is objecting to, but who in their right mind wouldn't object to it? Like the entire fleet, really? Like 100% of all the ships of the entire fleet in one place, not guarding any of the borders anymore, not guarding any other planet, putting all your ships into one place at the same time. So I guess they're planning to somehow use Picard's body, which maybe still has some Borg parts left in it, to summon the Borg, basically. And maybe the reason they wanted Jack Crusher delivered to them alive is also connected, and Beverly did say earlier that she thinks it has something to do with Picard, that he's the reason they were chasing his son all the time. And they're probably going to do something stupid, like saying they just need some of his blood to help them revive the dead body of Picard, to activate his Borg implants, to turn him into Locutus again, and that will somehow summon the entire Borg fleet to attack the entire Federation fleet. And we're probably going to see Locutus on the screen once again, which does sound like kind of a cool idea, but if you really think about it, it's still kind of silly, because they kept saying how Locutus was such a deadly Borg and all of that, but he was only deadly because he knew of the Federation defense plans for Wolf 359. He simply happened to know that information, and that's why the Borg were so effective. It's not like he himself personally was so clever that he made the Borg win that battle. It's simply because of his knowledge at that time. But since then he's a retired admiral, so all the knowledge that his old body has wouldn't be as deadly to Starfleet anymore, so it wouldn't really make sense that having Locutus is somehow more dangerous than any other Borg. So what's the point about specifically picking Picard? You want to provoke the Borg somehow? You could have picked any other former Borg drone, so why does it have to be Picard specifically? So it doesn't really make sense, but it does have the potential of having a cool resurrection of Locutus and having the new Picard fight his own previous self in the form of Locutus, fighting his own demons. Maybe we'll have a scene of Captain Shaw having a PTSD freakout, because they established all of that stuff earlier, so now it will make sense why they had to do it. I complained about all of that stuff, how come he's still so angry about Locutus 30 years later, but if they actually put him in a situation later in which he'll have to face Locutus again and overcome his fears and all of that, maybe it can be fun. And also Picard himself having to literally face his own demons of the past and literally fight against Locutus. And it also reminds me of some of my own fan edits. I used to do a lot of TNG recuts, using pieces of the shows to create my own new stories, and it was mostly done just for fun, just for comedy. But in one of them I remember I did something similar also. I remember in one edit I made Picard have a duplicate. It was either a clone or a temporal clone or something like that, and then one of them died, and then they ejected his body into space, and then the Borg came in and picked up that body and then resurrected him as Locutus, and then Picard was fighting Locutus on the screen against each other. And I remember when I made that video, some of my fans told me, oh, that's the same idea like in that computer game Starfleet Armada. And then I remember looking up that game and seeing they used the same idea. They showed as if the Borg cloned Picard to bring Locutus back, and then the real Picard was fighting against Locutus. So in the end of the season, we're probably going to see Locutus back again with another giant fleet attack. That's why they had that line setting up the Borg, saying the real Borg are still out there. All of that stuff from season 2 with the Stargazer, with the Jurati Collective, all of that stuff doesn't change the fact that the real Borg are still out there, and they have a name for you, Locutus, the deadliest Borg ever. So now it makes sense why they had that scene. It was a setup for what's to come in the end of the season. So the reason the changelings wanted to steal Picard's old body was to bring back Locutus, and maybe they need Jack Crusher to be able to revive him somehow because he has magic blood or something. He has anaphasic particles in him because of that ghost that slept with his entire family lineage for centuries, and it somehow passed down the anaphasic energy to him. And also in this episode they revealed that the reason he had the visions was simply because he inherited the iromodic syndrome that Picard had. And obviously that's not going to be the real explanation, because it doesn't explain how he was able to beat up 4 changelings in one scene, and why his eyes turned red, and why he kept seeing the future and stuff like that. So obviously it's not just a brain disease. I made a few theory videos about all of that. I will link it in the end of the video. And maybe none of those theories will come true, but it's still fun to kind of speculate about all of it. And so this episode annoyed me in my first viewing, especially because of that Moriarty disappointment, after they used him as clickbait in the trailer. And I guess Lore also was kind of a clickbait, because they also showed only Lore in the trailer. Oh, Lore is one of the villains, but in the end, oh, he's just a split personality, and Lore only sometimes takes over. And so by the end of the show, Data is probably going to be the main personality, and he'll be more human than ever. And maybe in the last scene, Geordi will unveil the restored Enterprise D, and then they will all go on board that ship for one final voyage on the Enterprise D, as they used to do. And that will be a beautiful ending. It is a very fan-servicey season, obviously, so many member bearers, so many silly ideas, but done in a fun way. So I have mixed feelings. There is a lot of silliness, a lot of stupidity in this episode, but also a lot of eye candy, a lot of good references, a lot of fun moments. And so overall I still kind of enjoyed it despite the silliness of it. And sometimes the silliest moments are also the most funny, because for example, when Data turned on his eye projectors to project a hologram from his eyes, that literally made me laugh. And so it was kind of so silly, it was good. So I still enjoyed it overall. So that's my opinion on this episode. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.